Hi guys, it's Claire Akin with the Fiddle Leaf Fig Plant Resource Center, and I'm so excited that you joined me to answer this question, which is, are coffee grounds or diluted coffee good for your fiddle leaf fig? And so I totally understand why people want to put coffee grounds on their plants. There's we all want to help our plants. We all want to give them more love and attention and nutrients, and it feels good to do something with things that you waste around your house, like coffee grounds after you brew them. It feels bad to throw them away, so you want to do something productive with them. I totally get that. But I think also people believe that there's this myth that adding acidity from the coffee grounds to the soil will improve the growing medium for your plant. And unfortunately, that's not true for fiddle leaf figs. And so I want to clear up the confusion you may have today and give you some tips and tricks to help your plants do better. So coffee grounds can be really beneficial for some plants. There are acid-loving plants, and they're typically in the rhododendron family. So rhododendrons include azaleas, and hydrangeas love acid, as well as camellias, and even blueberries. And so these plants really thrive in acidic soils, but that's not the norm. Generally, houseplants do not like acid, with the exception of maybe African violets. And so you don't want to just assume that all of your houseplants are acid-loving plants when they may not be. And so the other reason I think that people want to give their plants coffee grounds is that there is nitrogen in coffee grounds, which is a key component of a good fertilizer for your houseplants. But because you have nitrogen and not a lot of other things, you can actually create an imbalance if you give your plants basically coffee as a fertilizer. So before you give your plants any coffee grounds, let's talk about the risks. So putting organic compost in soil is not a good idea for indoor plants. So outdoor plants, you have a lot of decomposition. You have rain constantly filtering out, all of the things in the soil. You have decomposers, you have earthworms, you have this whole ecosystem, right? This amazing miracle of nature happening. Indoors in a potted plant, you don't have that. And so things that you add to your soil can actually contaminate it and cause infections, funguses, pest, disease, mold, mildew. It's unfortunately just not the place to add compost. And so, it could be acceptable to add coffee grounds to your outdoor plants, but that would actually be a smaller component of a larger composting program. You wouldn't only want to add coffee grounds to general outdoor plants. You would want to add coffee grounds to the compost, and that works within the whole compost environment to create better soil outdoors. So indoors, applying coffee grounds can cause excessive moisture retention, so your soil can't dry out. It can cause root rot, it can cause fungus, and really the thing that we see that's a problem is it causes your soil to become so acidic that your plant's roots can't absorb nutrients, and you have this yellowing of the leaves and this problem with over-acidification of the soil. And so without a full compost system, you just don't want to get into that with your indoor plants. It's just not suitable in the indoor environment. But let's talk about acidity in plants in general, because I think there's some good things to understand, and it is important to check the acidity of your soil for your indoor plants, and also to understand the acidity needs of your plants, because all indoor species have different acidity needs. And so the first thing I want you to know is that in our bodies and in the soil, there's a natural tendency to become more acidic. And so if you have soil and plants, as your soil is breaking down, it actually naturally becomes more acidic. And so acidity is not something you have to work to achieve. Even in our own bodies, they can become acidic with alcohol and coffee and not enough fruits and vegetables and the things that we should be having to make them more alkaline. And so don't worry about making your environment for your houseplants more acidic. It's probably acidic enough. I've never seen a plant where the environment is too alkaline. And so this is one reason that if you live in an area like I do that has pretty alkaline natural soil, it's hard to grow hydrangeas and camellias. But if you put them in pots, they do really well, because being contained in the pot, it just gets more acidic over time, and they love that. So hydrangeas around here do beautifully in pots, but if you put them in the ground, they really don't do so well. So that's one of the reasons for that. I actually use in my home and in my water purification system for my houseplants, I use an alkalinity filter as the last step to make the water more alkaline, and it's really made a big improvement on my plants. It's just caused them to have less browning of the tips and less issues, and just be overall healthier. So for fiddle leaf figs especially, you do want to think about getting your soil to be a bit more alkaline, as it has the tendency to become acidic over time. Next, let's talk about the big question in general. Do fiddle leaf figs like acidity? And what is the perfect pH for a fiddle leaf fig? So unfortunately, if you're really wanting to put coffee grounds on your plant, you're going to be disappointed because ficus in general and fiddle leaf figs are not acid-loving plants. And so they're not azaleas or hydrangeas or camellias or blueberries. They like a neutral soil. And so a 7 is a perfect pH neutral. Anything less than that's acidic. Anything over that is alkaline. They like about a 6.5 to 7. Anywhere between a 6 to 7 is going to be okay for a fiddle leaf fig, but you really want to keep it 6.5 to 7, which is basically pretty neutral. They'll do okay in slightly alkaline. Anything to 7.5 is fine as well. And so brewed coffee in general has a pH of anywhere between about 5.2 to 6.9. And so you actually don't know. Different coffees have different acidity. So if you were fertilizing your plants with coffee, you don't know if you're pulling them all the way down towards a 5 or if it's actually pretty pH neutral coffee. So coffee isn't just acidic necessarily. So it could be okay to pour coffee on your plant in that situation if it's not causing over acidification of your soil, or you could be pulling them way too low. And so that's just what you want to think about. So if you do have too much acid in your soil, there are signs that you will see. And so first of all, it's really interesting and it can be frustrating for people because the signs of too much acidity in your soil mimic exactly the signs of under-fertilization. And so you may be fertilizing your plant perfectly like you should, like we have our fiddle leaf fig plant food that is perfectly formulated to use every time you water on your plant. If you're doing that and your plant is still unhappy and it still has yellowing leaves and it still looks like it's not getting nutrients, it could be that the soil is too acidic and your plant is not able to absorb those nutrients. So yellowing is the most common thing we see with acidic soil. It's just an unhappy yellow leafed plant. And so what causes that? Also stunted growth. That's a big thing we see. You're fertilizing your plant, it looks okay, it doesn't have root rot, it's getting enough light, but it's not growing. Could be that it's too acidic. And so if you see those things going on in your plant, you just want to take a look and test your soil. And so here are 2 pictures of yellowing acidic leaves. So these are plants that we verified with our soil meter to be an acidity, a pH level of about 5. So remember the common range that we want to see is 6.5 to 7. These are way down at 5, and you can see the results on these plants. They're yellow, they're unhappy, they just look like something's generally wrong. And so we have this fiddle leaf fig soil meter, and what it does is, first of all, it's great to check the moisture in your pot before you water to make sure that you're not overwatering, but it also checks the light and the pH. And so you want to use this maybe once every couple months on all of your plants just to see where the pH is and just to see, is your soil too acidic? And so that's a great tool to know for sure where you're starting at and where you need to go from there. So if you find out, say you have an unhappy plant, has yellowing leaves, you're fertilizing it, but it's not growing, you can't figure out what to do, test the soil. And if you find that your soil is too acidic, so less than a 6 on the pH scale, there's some things you can do to fix it. So the first thing I would do is repot it if you can. We make a fiddle leaf fig potting soil that's the perfect pH. So if you can repot it, that'll correct the problem like that and it'll be fixed. If you can't repot it, say you have a huge tree and it's just too much work for you, you can actually create an alkaline environment for your plant by using alkaline water drops. So I'll connect to a listing on Amazon below where you can buy this alkalinity solution and you can mix it in your watering can and thoroughly water your plant, like almost, drench it, and it will create an alkaline soil and kind of reverse that acidity without actually having to repot your plant. And so let's also go over this idea that people have of, okay, if you're not worried about acidity, you check your acidity, it's good. You still want to give your plant coffee grounds because of the nitrogen and that idea. So in our fiddle leaf fig plant food, we have a percentage of nitrogen because that is the key component to any balanced fertilizer. The problem with that is that diluted coffee in general is about 1.45% nitrogen. So it's not a lot of nitrogen. So the things that you're going to get is a lot of nitrogen relative to nothing else of the other things that they need, like, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, calcium. They need all of this well-balanced diet. And so once in a while, coffee could be okay to give them a boost of nitrogen. But if that's all you're feeding them as a fertilizer, they're eventually going to become deficient in all of these other important nutrients. So that's just something to think about. The last reason that I think this coffee myth has persisted for fiddle leaf figs is that there is some data that shows that caffeine can cause growth spurts in plants. And so obviously coffee has caffeine. So they've done studies that show that if you give your plant caffeine, that it can result in an immediate growth spurt. And that instant gratification locks in, okay, coffee made my plant grow, I'm going to keep doing it. It can work for a little bit, but you don't want to rely on coffee as your sole source of fertilizer in the long run. It may be once in a while that it works because of that caffeine boost that you get. So it's something that you would want to do on top of a general overall fertilization plan and checking the acidity of your soil just to make sure that it's not too acid. So once in a while, it's okay to do if you like it. And if you get that growth burst out of your plant, that's a lot of fun. And just a word to the wise, make sure that you're never using coffee with cream and sugar. That could really damage your plant. And if you're going to pour coffee on your plant, make sure it's diluted and that it is cool room temperature. We just don't want to shock your plant with anything too hot or too strong. All right, well, I hope that was helpful. If you have any other questions about your plants, please comment below. I'll answer them in the next video. Join our Facebook group where we have 20,000 fiddle leaf fig lovers that would love to answer your questions about your plant. And follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.